Adam looked out of his base. Something was moving through the trees. His forces were already reporting that elves were on the move. War bows and swords were ready, and he knew that they were after him. The fools couldn't see what he was doing. If they would just leave him alone, they would benefit too. Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide, Jason. Today, I want to ask a question. Could elves actually win a war against humans? Now, I know that sounds like a stupid question. Of course elves could win a war against humans. What's the issue? Well, there are a few of them, and they are major ones. The first question is, how do elves compare to humans? Often they are shown to be more agile with improved balance than humans. We see them running on branches and jumping from tree to tree. They are depicted using bows at a level vastly beyond that of any human. Is that true? Are elves better than humans? Well, one of the major things about elves is they are shown living much longer, for centuries, if not millennia. They take time to develop their skills, and they got time. Their youth persists far beyond that of a human, to the point that we don't even notice them aging across our entire lifespan. Imagine the armies of man and elf fighting, blades clashing as arrows whirl above them. Amidst it, all people die, both human and elf. Both groups separate and regroup. How long before they could strike out again? A war isn't just one battle, but many which can span years. How long after one war is the next? The ancient Greek and Persian wars, for example, not to mention the constant wars between England and France in history. But those are human-on-human wars. There are a couple of things that you need to fight a war: weapons, soldiers, food, supplies with farmers, fortifications, scouts. There is a fair bit. But above everything you need manpower. And thus is the crux of the problem between a war of human and elves. How long do elves need to replace their population? This is the basis of the population growth equation. A is the final population, P is the population at the start, R is the population growth rate. For modern humans, it is about 2.3 children per couple, or 1.15 child per adult. N is the generational time, how long an individual needs before they can have children. Technically, it is about 15 years, but most humans don't become parents until sometime in their 20s. And T is time. Now the R is a bit more complex. I said most modern humans have it at 2.3, but in ancient times, it wasn't uncommon for a couple to have 9 children. But we also meet a higher rate of child mortality. But once they reached their teens, their chance of survival increased, with the most common cause of death being accidents, war, and childbirth. Now, all of this would also apply to the elves. But there is an issue. What is the generational time of an elf? Generally speaking, the longer lived a creature is, the longer it takes to reach adulthood, and can have their own children. But in most cases, the longer lived species are also the biggest. But elves are human-sized, so would they follow the same pattern? And I don't have a hard line on this. Most theories say that elves take much longer to reach adulthood than humans, decades to centuries. And if they take longer to mature, they could also assume a similar issue with child mortality for them. They would basically be an infant and toddler for a longer period. We also don't know the length of their pregnancies. Though, due to the comparable human size, you would think that their developmental process would be similar. Of course, the factor which makes them age slower could also slow down their fetal development. And finally, we can see the issue. If humans can replace their population in 20 or 30 years, how far would the elves have gotten? Probably only a few of their women would be pregnant. If humans could double their population every generation, and let's say the elves take 1,000 years to match. So 1,000 years divided by 25 gives us about 80 generations. So if the humans start at 100, then by the time the elves have matured, the human population would be 109,951,777,600 humans, in 1,000 years. Yes, that is insane and impossible to maintain, which is why populations don't actually double. But I want you to see how insane the numbers could get for humans under ideal situations. So, if we plug the growth rate of 1.15 into a calculator and assume I don't do it wrong, we should get a human population of 9,244,578 people, starting with just 100 people. This is a more likely option. And this is the key to the problem of elves winning against humans in a war. Sure, the elves would win a battle easily, but what about the battle after that? And the next, and so on. In each conflict, they lose individuals. It doesn't need to be many, just one or two, but that would build up. And then we need to look at weapons. A bow's range is based on poundage, how heavy it is to pull it back. But could humans use the same poundage with the accuracy? Well, yes. It is harder to aim with a higher poundage, but not impossible. It just takes practice and time. The latter, an elf would easily get over a human. But they could only fire so many arrows in a minute. And just look at the numbers. Humans could outnumber them and get a lucky shot off. Basically, this is a quality versus quantity situation. I'm sure each of you prefer one or the other, but that is the situation. The same issue applies in sword fighting. Even if an elven swordsman can take 10 humans at a time, they'll lose when you add in one additional human. Not to mention that eventually their blade will dull after slaying a few humans. Since we are talking fantasy, the same issue comes up with magic. They can only cast so many spells at a time with a limited mana amount. What all of this means is elves need a high kill per action second to stand a chance against humans. Each arrow needs to be a kill. You might be able to get 2 with a sword swing, but that isn't too common. The best option would be large area effect spells. Sure, they'd probably cost more mana, but the most efficient use of their time and attacks. But then the humans would fall back and regroup. In a couple of decades, and then everything repeats. It would be bloody for humans, with a high casualty rate, just to bring down 1 or 2 elves with each attack. But that is going to slowly grind them down. But I mentioned a couple of other issues that all tie back to a single thing: the supporting population. Farms and smiths provide food and weapons. Due to their faster growth rate, humans could afford to lose these people as well and still recover, but not so much for elves. Though I have failed to touch on one important factor when it comes to population growth rates. For mammalian species, that is the number of females, which bottlenecks population growth rate. A male could get dozens of females pregnant at a time, but each female can only carry a few children at a time, and they need recovery time after giving birth before they can get pregnant again. So if you lose lots of women, it will ultimately reduce the total population growth rate. Have you ever wondered why societies use men in war? Because losing the men has less impact on the society's ability to recover from war. So long as the society has a handful of men, it can recover. Oh, there would be issues, but it can survive. But if it loses majority of the women, it will collapse. And this is something that could be devastating. A raid aimed at the civilian population, which cost the lives of many of their women. The elves would collapse. Oh, it wouldn't be apparent for a while, probably a few centuries, but it would happen. Ultimately, I believe that is why we almost always see elven society in a collapse in fantasy. They have ancient ruins left across the world. They are becoming rarer to encounter, more isolated. Well, it is likely due to they are suffering population decline. How often are the wars in a fantasy series? Well, if the war is just human on human and the elves can remain neutral, they would be fine. But when the Dark Lord arises with his army of goblins and orcs and rampage across the land, setting forests and fields to the flame, the elves could try running, but eventually are forced to face the foe and have casualties. But what is the goblin generation time? Well, very short, probably shorter than humans. And it is something that humans would need to address in their conflicts. There are a couple of biological tricks that could help save the elves. The first is masting. It is something that you see trees do when they drop all their seeds at once and in very large numbers. If elves have a high rate of triplets, it could help reduce the risk of losing a child for the population growth rate. The second would be for them to mature much faster through the childhood phase. So they could reach the teenage and adult phase quicker, but then slows down. This could have problems elsewhere. Overall, I'm not sure if elves could stand a chance against humans. They could dominate the battle, but the slow effects of many attacks would eventually cause them to break. The long lives of elves doesn't promote wars of attrition. Even a 1% death rate will eventually break them. Adam walked amongst the dead, the broken bodies of elves laid across the fields. Oh, he lost some of his forces, but nothing compared to the elves, and it left them open to a counterattack. He smiled at the potential. Yes, he would come out ahead after this skirmish. A conflict between humans and elves is inevitable in most series, and elves may struggle to come out on top over the long run. Thank you for watching, adventurers. Please return next time for the Philosopher's Stone. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.